You know, Eric, they say two heads are better than one.
Absolutely true. And nowhere is that more true than when you co-DM a game.
That's how we roll. 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 That's how we roll.
Welcome to the Goblins Corner. My name is Eric.
And I'm Matt.
And tonight,
We're talking about co-DMing a game.
that's right. If you are interested in running a game with another person, this episode is for you.
We're going to talk about why, how, and give you some tips and tricks.
It's a lot of fun. It's really easy. And this is how we do it. So first off, you might ask yourself, why do I want to co-DM a game? Matt, we've got a couple answers.
Firstly, it offers opportunities to share the creativity, both in the storytelling and the work behind the scenes.
Yeah, it's literally easier to run a game when there's another person handling some of that game. It also is, as we mentioned, less work for the DMs. And that could be because you share tasks or because maybe you build on each other's strengths.
Another strength of co-DMing is that it allows players to see and interact with different styles of playing in the same game.
Yes, if you happen to be a train conducting type of DM that writes everything out and your friend is an improv style DM that comes up with nothing but a sheet of paper and a couple of ideas and you mash together, it ends up being fun. Speaking of which, games that are co-DM'd are super fun.
Yes.
You can have an amazing amount of time plotting with your buddies to come up with a game that your players will talk about for years to come.
It also cuts down on the DMs having to have conversations with themselves.
Absolutely true. Yes. I hate having conversations with myself.
When you have two NPCs talking, that's the worst.
You could have two people that
You could actually talk to somebody.
Yeah. It's so much easier. So to get started, there are three basic strategies that we would advise you to use when you're going to co-DM a game. So first off, pre-game, then we have during the game, and then we have
After the game.
Post-game. Yeah.
In between.
So let's talk about what are you going to do pre-game, Matt?
The first thing you're going to do is decide if you want to DM back and forth or if you are DMing at the same time.
Yes, these are two different play styles, two different ways to tell a story, and both of them, by the way, are perfectly acceptable, but it bears note that that will affect how you kind of co-DM, right? So let's take a look at this. Back and forth. One DM is the storyteller for a session or a story arc or, what have you, while the other one plays a character. This is really good because if you want to play a character, then you can.
Right. Starting a game doesn't mean that you do not get to play for 4 years.
Exactly. And, the problem is many times if you have a long-running game, that could happen.
Yes.
You're playing a character for 4 years, you're DMing for 4 years. This is great for those forever DMs.
Yes.
And then maybe you get to a stage, you swap it off, right? Now, the other option, of course, is
at the same time. There are different ways to do this. Like a DM could take an area of a city.
We call this the living city game.
Right. Because in the old style, it was each DM ran a specific section of a city, but that could be separated into kingdoms, geographic features.
Yeah, what have you.
Individual planes if you're playing Planescape.
Oh, yeah.
That sort of thing.
Another option is they take an aspect of the game. So, for example, one DM might run the monsters and encounters, while the other DM jumps in whenever it's role play or story-driven heavy. This, by the way, is a lot of fun.
Yes.
A lot of fun. If you're the type of DM that loves to kill, test your characters. Don't say kill. You might be the DM that makes up
on
trap.
the game.
Yeah, it depends on the game, right? You might be a trap DM that loves making horrible death traps. Guess what? We are too. Then this is perfect for you. You got another DM that wants to just role play. This is perfect for you as well. Mash them together like peanut butter jelly. Call it a day.
Yep. It's very helpful for people who maybe aren't super comfortable role playing, and they can get the mechanics down. They can get the verbiage and the practice down during the combat sections and kind of ease their way into role playing. Whereas if you've got someone who's been to improv classes or did theater for years, they are already probably super comfortable sitting there and just having in character conversations for hours.
And this is an excellent point too, because It allows you to play on your strengths. And if you're not great as you mentioned, as role playing, this is a great way to ease yourself into a role playing game with the role playing part. Maybe you know the rules, right?
Right.
Or maybe you're trying to learn the rules, but you're good at making stuff up. You having another DM kind of help out with that stuff allows you to become a better DM straight up, right?
Absolutely.
So once you've established how you're going to flip-flop back and forth for the DMing, we establish just some basic roles and responsibilities.
Firstly, who does what?
Right. So we mentioned the play styles. This is similar to that, right? What is the DM going to do? Is one DM going to run monsters? Is it going to take over for an entire session? Like, write those rules down in terms of the responsibilities and how the DM styles are going to be played, because you don't want to change that in the middle of your game.
Who does what could just be each DM playing to their strengths.
Exactly, like we mentioned before.
It is important to define some boundaries before the game happens.
What do I mean by boundaries?
Well, first off, obviously, you do your session 0, but when you're co-DMing, you basically need a session -1 for the DMs, so that you know things like who has the final say, who makes decisions for important overarching NPCs, because those could be different things. You could have one person who's very good at combat and mechanics, and they make the combat and mechanics decisions, whereas the person, if they are in the driver's seat for the story, they make the final decisions for the actual story.
I 100% agree. By the way, I love the idea of calling it a session -1. We're going to use that in the future at some point. You heard it first here.
That's right.
I love that. I'll tell you a real world example, okay? Maybe you are a DM that is really good with the rules for, we'll just use D&D, right?
Sure.
5th edition, I know all the rules, right? You might not know the rules or the lore behind Forgotten Realms or Eberron or something like that.
Sure.
But your buddies read all the books.
Right.
They get in there, and now you've got a perfect combination. And
Right.
you determine, okay, when it's lore-based, I make the rules. I make the final decisions on that. If it's combat or, rules-related, then the other person makes the decisions and such. Now, I will say this, and I'm going to stress this more than once in this episode, but go ahead and define this before the game.
Yes.
Don't do this in the middle of the game, or you will suffer.
And so will the players.
Yes, because it's going to cause confusion.
Right.
In addition to getting these clear roles and responsibilities, we also need to develop a shared vision. Let's talk about that.
You have to get together, get your story put together. And I'm not talking about, you're not writing a novel, right?
No.
But have the important story beats, have the important moments that make this story together, so that both people know where this is going.
Yes, and depending upon your play styles with the two DMs, this could widely differ, right? They might write a whole bunch of stuff out, or they might just have a couple of shared bullet points, either of which is fine. Here's some examples. You might outline the campaign together, which could include hashing out the setting, the main plot points, maybe the themes or the monsters, and more importantly, like the style of playing that you're both going to do.
You got to ensure that you understand the direction the story is going. Also, you have to have, because players are players, right? You have to have some alternates, some potential arcs and side quests, because your players are going to do that.
Yes, they make the story just like the two DMs. Again, got to remember that.
Yes, that's
Very important. Don't railroad the players. I'll say this again when we get to playing the game. Don't railroad the players. Give them options. And it's a great idea with the other DM to brainstorm alternate ideas or consequence of actions.
So I just had a thought that we didn't write down. A story flowchart.
Sure.
If then, right? And then both of you at least can, as much as is foreseeable, just ride the flowchart out.
Yeah, if you got a whiteboard or a piece of paper, write that stuff down, take a picture of it, stick it up, in your shared location that you share all your documents.
Yep.
If you want to use some mind mapping software like FreeMind or something like that, go for it, right?
Absolutely.
Anything works. Speaking of which, creating a common document is a great idea. I would highly recommend it.
I agree. Now, here we say either physical or digital, Realistically,
It's probably both.
it's probably both. Especially if you have two very separate people. Eric deals in almost strictly digital media, and I deal in almost strictly physical media. It's just who we are.
That's fine, right? And it can contain any kind of stuff that you want to put in there, but like campaign details are probably a good example. What else would we have in there?
Notes on NPCs,
Yeah.
locations, plot threads.
Stuff that's related to the game and what you and your co-DM and your players come up with.
Couple maps probably couldn't hurt.
There's nothing wrong with some maps. Come up with some maps. You know what? This is a great time, again, pre-running the game to, I don't know, etch-a-sketch out some ridiculous maps in your game world, particularly if you're homebrewing something. But even if you're not, let's say you're on the Sea of Fallen Stars in the Forgotten Realms, which Matt and I are very familiar with because we ran a pirate campaign on the Sea of Fallen Stars. And we would just come up with random islands.
There's like a bazillion out there. Just drop one in.
Yeah. You know what you do? You get your coffee cup, you drink most of your coffee, you spill the rest of your coffee on a piece of paper. That's the island. There you go.
That's what it's shaped like.
Yeah. Problem solved, right? It works.
I've also done grab a handful of dice and drop it on a sheet of paper and then outline whatever the shape of the dice are.
Yes, absolutely. All of what we're doing basically is for establishing some sort of consistency and to maintain your sanity.
Sure.
Because you don't want to go crazy trying to come up with stuff.
You should also start the player lore document as the game begins together.
And we'll talk about that when we get to the actual playing the game and after the game. Finally, you need to plan your meetings. When you're going to meet up, right?
Sure.
Got to make sure that, timetables and stuff work for your players and for the other DM. Now, we didn't mention this also, but this is a perfect time that, let's say you've got people who can play at a specific time, but maybe you've got a job.
Right.
It happens.
It does indeed.
We've got jobs. Sometimes we're not happy about that. But Matt isn't always able to play my games.
Very true.
But maybe your players could play both times, or maybe I can only play every other week, but they want to play weekly. Well, this is a perfect time to co-DM, right?
Absolutely.
Matt jumps in every other week. There you go. That's an easy way to solve stuff. Or if you've got some rabid players that want to play the entire weekend, and if you do, good for you.
Yeah.
You should
enjoy it.
Hug them, do something nice for them. Then you might play Friday, and the other person does Saturday, right?
Mm-hmm.
You could even have 3 DMs.
You could.
But that would be a lot more work. Maybe.
Maybe.
Right?
It really depends on the 3 people.
Yeah, so figure out when you're going to actually run that campaign. Put it on a calendar, folks. Not only that, because I've herded cats for a long time in both improv and professionally, make sure that you remind people frequently. Having a calendar invite is an easy way to do it, because otherwise they're going to text you or hit you up on Discord and be like, are we playing? When are we playing? When are we playing tonight? It's the same damn time each week, but somehow they don't remember it. Happens more than...
Oh, I know. You're going to need to have a way to share notes.
Yep. What do we recommend?
Google Drive generally.
Yeah, or whatever you happen to use.
Right.
There's lots of different options. If you're interested in more ways to kind of get collaborative, either online or with physical media, see our episode on getting organized.
Let's talk about during the game now.
Okay, so we've established our pregame. We've got everything knocked out. We've had our session 0 and our -1.
Right.
We've maybe written some stuff down. Everybody knows when to meet. We're going to play the game. Okay, let's divide your tasks. So while you're playing the game, determine if you're DMing the verse at the same time or round robin, right? And that'll depend on how you're going to DM.
Sure.
But again, who's doing what while you're playing?
And for those who don't know, just in case, round robin is, say, Eric might DM Monday, I'll DM Tuesday, he'll DM Wednesday, so that you just are, and on some occasions, you'll just go around the table.
Mm-hmm.
But co-DMing at the same time is pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah. And if you're doing like a living city or something that's geographically based at the same time, then, you just want to make sure, okay, I know I'm handling this part of the city or this part of the country or whatever, and you're handling this plane or whatever that happens to be, right?
Sure.
One thing that doesn't ever get talked about very much is
having everything ready to go.
What do we mean by that?
Maps, minis, anything that you're going to have physically present for the game, have that set. That way you don't have someone covering or babbling or just off to the side while somebody shuffles through a milk crate full of minis and stuff.
Yep. So props as well. So all the miniatures and stuff like that. Music also is another good example. If you don't play with music, you should. We've got an episode on that. Got an episode on a lot of these things. Don't make the other DM and the players wait.
Yeah.
It's just bad form. And it's really easy to do when you're co-DMing, particularly if you're doing it at the same time.
When to speak at DM to DM is something you have to figure out. You have to figure out how to let the other person know it's their turn to talk or that you need to say something without that interrupting the game.
Yeah, because you want the change to be as seamless as possible. So if I'm running combat and you're running RP, you want to kind of maybe give like a nonverbal cue to the other DM to say, hey, it's my turn to jump in.
Right.
Or if it's literally roll initiative, then it maybe is my turn to jump in for the combat, right? Because you're handling RP.
Yeah. There's lots of ways you can do this. You could just, throw a hand up, do a little hand gesture. In the case you just mentioned, I could literally just pick up a big ass D20 and drop it on the table. If the player said something that was too far,
yep,
you just clunk. Oh, okay, well, this is where we're at. I'll sit down now.
Now, if you're playing in person, there's a lot of easy ways to do it. One thing that we've seen people do, particularly at like conventions and stuff, is to have like a little flag, and they just set that flag or token in front of the person that's DMing. Another way to do it is if you've got like a really cool DM chair, the other DM just gets their ass up and sits someplace else, and the other DM sits in the DM's chair.
Right.
And so if you want to do that, that's cool. Obviously, if you're playing online, then you can't do that. But then you can also send them a message online as well.
Yeah, you just instant message them. If you were setting this up online, if Eric and I were running a game, co-DMing online, you could even have light cues.
That's a good point.
Just throw up a red light or a green light. A green light is the DM that's talking at the moment. The red light is the one that's in the background. And if I need to interject, I just hit my green light.
100%. This also is really fun if you're streaming too. I've seen co-DMs stream on like Twitch and stuff like that, and whenever it gets to combat, they go red light. We've done that with our Planescape adventure.
Absolutely.
And so that would be an excellent way to transition back and forth between DMs.
In addition to the DMing part, you may have one DM that takes notes, or preferably both that take notes while the other DM is talking or in charge of the situation.
I love this idea because one of the things I personally hate doing is writing all the stuff that I did or that the characters did after the game, because we usually play at night, so we're all tired.
And I don't multitask well enough to take notes while I'm running the scene.
Another thing that the co-DM could also do is, for example, do voices. So maybe if you don't like doing voices, that might be one of the tasks that you separate. So whenever there's a voice, I might do the funny voice. Matt doesn't do the funny voice.
Sure.
Or maybe one of us has a soundboard. That's a lot of fun.
We need a trap soundboard.
A traps soundboard? There's going to
like
be
when the pit trap and the
yes. Yeah, there's going to be the Wilhelm scream in it.
Sure.
There's also going to be the I don't even know what that's going to run it. What kind of trap that's going to be? Who knows?
It's a sonic trap.
It's going to be a gnome with an air horn. That's
Sure.
all I know. Some kind of sonic damage. This will all be determined by how you've mapped out your, who does what.
Sure.
As we mentioned before.
Decide all of this ahead of time.
And have fun with this.
Yeah.
This gives you the ability to focus on the stuff that you want to do.
That's it, right? Like, this is supposed to be fun for DMs also.
Yes. Another thing to consider when you are running the game, collaborate and communicate. Communication is key.
Just like in every role-playing game, you just have an extra person in the driver's seat.
Yes. Also, I told you I'd say this again, talk to your players. It is not just about the two DMs coming up with the story. It is also the players. Your players should add equally or more to the story than the two DMs combined. If they're not, you're doing something wrong.
Sure.
I mean, this is a collaborative storytelling game. This is always, doesn't matter what rules it is, right? It could be Cypher, could be Cthulhu, could be D&D, doesn't matter.
Speaking of rules, though, that is one of the great benefits of co-DMing.
What do you mean?
If I'm in the scene and one of my players says, "Oh, I want to try X," and I'm not necessarily sure how X works, my co-DM can already be looking up the rules checks for that.
Oh, that's a good point.
So that, once again, you move as seamlessly as possible for the story.
So a good pro DM tip is, if you don't know the rules, again, do the little hand signal, right? One DM's looking up the rules, you're filling in the description during, say, the combat or whatever that happens to be, so that everything's still moving forward, and then at that later point, the DM then chimes back in, the co-DM, and gives you that ruling on that, whatever that happens to be, on that question.
Sure. And if it's something that has to be known right this second, you've already got somebody jumping on it. Now, you and I like to do like the 2-3 minute rule, right? If you can't find the rule within 2 or 3 minutes,
Make something up.
make a call, move on, look it up later, and explain that to the group.
Yep, and that's a easy way to do that. It can get confusing with 2 DMs sometimes, so you can also have that as well.
Sure.
Another communication and collaboration thing to consider is about conflicts. Conflict resolution, it will happen at some point in your game.
Yeah.
And it's going to be arguments. Who decides what, right? If disagreements arise, either between the 2 DMs or the 3 DMs or the players, guess what? Address them promptly.
Don't let things fester. Don't let people get upset about things. Put it on the table, talk through it, keep it moving.
You have to be careful. There's no good cop, bad cop, right? You don't want one DM being argumentative and the other one, being for the players. They should be neutral in the game.
Unless that is literally the idea of the story, which could be super fun. Also,
good. Like the angel and the devil. That would be an excellent way to run a game. Maybe it's a planar campaign and one DM is the overlord of all of like the good cosmic deities. The other one is for all of like the pit, all of the infernal creatures.
Sure.
That would be fun. I'd have 4 DMs. Then I'd have one for the Modrons and one for the Slod.
Oh yeah. Why not?
Have a 4 DM round robin.
Primus and the Chaos Crystal.
Sure, why not? We talked about who has a final say beforehand, pre-game. This will come up. You already need to know who's going to have that final say so that if these disagreements come up, that co-DM, whoever that happens to be, can decide that.
Listen to your players.
Yes.
If you're not talking, you should be listening and communicating with what you heard with the other DM.
This is how you co-DM.
Right. It is one of the benefits of having 2 DMs. You have 2 sets of ears
to listen. If I'm saying something, Matt should be listening. If Matt's saying something, then I'm listening, probably taking notes, doing sound effects or whatnot.
Right. And if the players are saying something, we should both be listening.
And both be taking notes. Because if you're both taking notes while the players are doing really cool stuff, then when the end of the night comes together and you put together a little document, maybe I have gotten some really interesting things and maybe I didn't hear something, but Matt heard it.
And the other thing is people have different points of view. Maybe you took something in a different way than I did. And so we get to, like, if you thought something was amazing and I just missed the importance of it, then we get to cover that and make sure that gets highlighted at a later time.
This brings us up to another point. Support each other's decisions. As co-DMs, you have to yes and out of this.
And you have to enthusiastically support each other.
Yes, if one DM comes up with something, fully support the idea, even if you don't like it. Sorry, that's why you're co-DMing.
Right.
Hash it out later. If the DM has an idea you don't like, but they made it canon, you got to support it. You can figure that out and talk about it after the fact, but this is why it's a collaborative game. It would be the same thing if the characters came up with something and it may not be the direction that you as a DM wanted to go in. Too bad.
Yeah.
It's collaborative. Suck it up, support it.
The players went down crime alley. Sometimes that's just...
They decided to take that dragon on. They decided to kill that noble or do whatever the consequence of actions happen to be.
Yep.
And that is totally fine. That's how the story's going. Goes down a dark path sometimes, folks.
It's true. In fact, our next note is encourage the players to get involved.
Yes. Build from these ideas. Building from characters' ideas is very important. Remember, as we said, it's their story too. Support their decisions.
And in a lot of occasions, gleefully steal their ideas.
To build your world.
That's right.
And if you're curious about that, see our episode on world building for even more info on that. We've got a whole episode on world building. It's important to listen because you don't want to overshadow anybody's ideas.
You are the facilitator for this story. You are not the author.
That's correct. Speaking of other things we happen to be correct at, we've got what, Matt?
It's time for the question of the week.
All right. What's the question of the week for this week?
Well, you know, I like to keep it on theme. So let's say we are co-DMing and we're splitting the areas of a city. What part of the city do you most want to be in charge of?
I would say I would like to be in charge of the crime-ridden aspects of the city. I love the scum and villainy.
The sprawl.
Yeah, I like the sprawl. You know what else I would like? The Undercity.
Okay.
Where the monsters dwell.
Sure.
That's just, I'm less interested in like the nobility in the upper parts of the city just because I can do it. That's fine.
Sure.
But I just like the...
it's not as enjoyable to you.
The grit.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about yourself?
The Temple Ward, just because there are a lot of factions and directions you can play there, or the Noble Ward, exactly in opposition to you, because I feel like in a lot of games and a lot of stories and what have you, the villains are relatable. They're understand. Oh, if I was in that position, I might have made the same decision, blah, blah. There is no villain as wonderful as someone who had every opportunity to be an amazing human being and decided to be a piece of just absolute garbage. And to me, nobility is like they've got money, they've got education, they have every opportunity to make the world a better place.
So you just like dickbag nobles.
I like giving the players someone that they can gleefully find as a punching bag.
I love that. That's great. It's a great answer. I got nothing to say to that, except that's full of win. Of course, we're always interested in your answers to the question of the week, and if you have one, hit us up at Goblin's Corner on all the social media that we happen to be part of. And in addition to that, you could do what, Matt?
If you're watching us on YouTube, you can just comment down below. That's what it's there for.
Yeah, we like comments.
Well, I also just like to know people's answers because I'm nosy.
They've got a lot of answers. So we have pre-gamed, we've run our game, co-DMing and such. Now we come to the after game, right? So in between the game sessions.
Sure.
Got a couple of options that you can do as a co-DM. First up, get feedback from your players.
Yes.
Very important.
This is important whether or not you co-DM. You should just try and get some feedback from your players.
Yeah, if you should ask your players, first off, are they having fun? Because if they're not, do something about it.
Yeah. Is there something they'd like to see more of? Something they'd like to see less of?
This helps both DMs, when you're co-DMing, understand what's important and keep working at that, or improve the stuff that's not working.
The other thing is talk to your other DM about what they liked, didn't like, and would like to change.
Yeah, you got to talk to each other. Maybe you felt that the narrative style could use some work, or maybe you really enjoyed one aspect of DMing. Maybe you want to try something different. This is the perfect time in between games to do that.
If you're someone who's doing the whole mechanics versus RP, you could do an episode where you switch places to both become better DMs, because now you're in charge of the thing you're not as good at.
That's true. This is also a good time to update that lore document. Remember we talked about that?
Yes.
What is that lore document? This is for the players, and this keeps the players informed and remembering all of the cool stuff that they said and you said.
It also informs the players what they have learned in the process of this story. As co-DMs, you need a separate document with the actual truth, but this is the ones that they have learned.
Oh, that's a good point. Another thing to consider, too, is you don't want to have to regurgitate the same thing over and over and over. A lot of times...
It's not an anime. You don't want to have to do a half episode recap every single time.
You don't want to do a previously on. And I'm going to tell you this, that your players aren't going to remember everything, and they're going to be like, wait, who is this person? Having this lore document for them, and then having a lore document for both the DMs is very useful. Yes, it's going to take a little bit more time. Do it anyway. Finally,
adapt to the players, the story and your styles as you play. This is, especially if you're new to co-DMing, this is an experiment, right? It's a great time to kind of fine tune aspects that you like to play into for a better experience.
Yeah. It's all about growth, right? Grow as a DM. You got another person there to support and help you and build something amazing. Try different things out.
Yeah. This is the perfect time to try some things that maybe you've seen other people do or that you have liked when you saw someone else pull it off, right? Like, go ahead and use this time to experiment a little bit.
This is one of those things, and again, this is coming from an improviser here, but this is one of those things where it's like, I like doing improv because I have a team, because I have someone that if I make a mistake or if I'm unsure about something, I've got literally another person or a group of people backing me up, supporting my decisions, and enjoying the story with me. You've got another person when you're co-DMing who is there to help you. They're not rivals.
Right.
They're there to make your job easier and to support and grow. And that's your job as well.
As in improv, right? Sometimes when you make a mistake, the person with you sees a direct path of how this is an awesome opportunity.
Oh, yes.
And sometimes when your wheels are spinning because you're like, I didn't mean to do that. How am I going to fix this? The other person's just like, yes.
That is an amazing point because they might be able to justify your ridiculous decision and you might be going, I have no idea how this is going to work. But they've got the answer because they've been watching it intently and going, oh, well, if that happens, then this is going to happen. So here's this flump.
Yep. Rube Goldberg, run it.
The Rube Goldberg flump. That's how we're calling it, right? It's just one flump which leads to another flump, which leads to a game session of hugs. It's a delightful flump.
A loving, caring beholder flump.
A beholder flump. Why not? Yeah. All right. We've gone over how you run a co-DM'd game. What are some games that work really well? We've got a couple.
Small groups of players make a great co-DMing campaign.
Yes. I would say this is probably the best if you want to experiment co-DMing a game straight up. Because if you've got a small group of players, then that lets you play a lot of different roles as a co-DM.
This is a great opportunity to round robin like a 2 or 3 person table.
Mm-hmm.
And if all 3 people are playing characters, right? The person who's DMing, their character takes a backseat, has a responsibility they have to deal with, and they run for the other 2 players. Having an active player character as a DM, unless it's a necessity, is generally suboptimal.
Yes. It also lets DMs play a needed character when they're not DMing.
Yes.
So if you are a forever DM, here you go. In contrast to this, we also have multi-party campaigns. This is where each DM takes a party, ensuring some sort of worldwide consistency. Now, this can be the same group of adventurers on different days, or it could be literally 2 different games based in the same world, and at the end of each session, the DMs chat.
Yes.
This is a lot of fun.
The game I want to run is 2 rival adventuring parties that are actually 2 group of players with 2 different DMs, and they keep hearing stories about what the other rival adventuring party is up to.
So hear me out. This is an Acquisitions Inc. campaign.
Oh, nice. They're operating at the edge of each other's working territory.
Yeah. They're rivals. They're in 2 different geographical regions, and then for the final showdown, both DMs are co-DMing that same game.
Sure.
That would be a lot of fun.
In multi-party campaigns, DMs would collaborate on crossovers, shared locations, common monsters, NPCs, that sort of thing.
Or any big events that might have happened that shaped the world, too.
Right. If somebody sets off a volcano, that the other group needs to know about that.
Now, this requires a lot of coordination between the 2 DMs, but as we mentioned, it can be a lot of fun.
I do wonder if you could just set up a voice to text for the entire campaign and just trade notes that way.
That would be interesting.
You could just run it through it with a highlighter for the really important stuff, but if they wanted to read in detail, they could.
Episodic DMing is another way that you can co-DM. Now, this is a fun way to play because you can just set up an off game. So I might run one game, you might run the next, and then whoever's not DMing the game plays a character.
Sure.
This is a very easy way to co-DM.
Right.
This could also have other uses as well. So, for example,
one of the things I really enjoy is doing it by location.
Yes.
It allows you to know the lore of that location. When you're in charge of this block, you can know everything about this block.
Roll into that block. Now the other DM takes charge.
Yep.
Can also do this by story arc. This is a lot of fun. So when you get to a certain point in the story, and this can be usually like a month or a couple months, depending on how frequently you play. This is right about the time when the DM's like, all right, I've done chapter 1 of my story. I want to play a character. Perfect time to tag out.
I have a great idea for this. You do it by Lieutenant General BBEG.
Okay.
So you start a campaign. The BBEG for the first story arc is actually the lieutenant to the general who I now run to the actual big BBEG who you run.
So it just keeps going back and forth and building on that.
Right. And, each person doesn't necessarily know who they work for if it's a shadowy organization or something like that. So it could be a complete surprise from story arc to story arc.
I love that. Could also be milestones or some sort of quest completion as well.
Sure.
And again, as we mentioned, this is perfect for a Planescape campaign because it's...
You do it by plane.
Yeah, do it by plane. But it's any game that has a lot of history, geography, and so forth. Perfect example of that is Forgotten Realms.
Absolutely.
If I don't know what's going on in Myth Draenor, is it even around anymore? Who knows? I don't know.
It is.
It's probably around.
It
yeah.
is.
And Matt happens to know that, then great. Or it could be Eberron. Maybe you aren't as familiar with the city of Sharn as I am, right?
Right.
My time to take over.
Or the players decided to go to Zendrick.
Yep. This brings us to our next type of game, which co-DMing is perfect for.
And I did mention this earlier, the Living City style game. And that is where each person runs a ward or section of geography.
Yes. One note of this is it doesn't have to be a city. Think about this. It could be levels of a dungeon.
Absolutely.
Now, this would be great to roll into Hallister's dungeon.
Yeah, you could definitely do
Undermountain?
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
What if it is a dungeon that has had multiple lords over the year, and so different levels are completely different flavors?
100%. Story and combat flip. This is an interesting type of game to play. Let me explain that further. One DM is the storyteller, and they run all of the RP elements, and the other DM is the tactical DM, and they run any combat encounters. This is perfect for newer DMs.
Yes.
And newer DM could be either new at role-playing or new at running combat rules.
Right. This is also really good for someone who's a great storyteller, but whose players are far more tactically advanced than they are.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even if you've been running for a long time, if I were to run a game for a bunch of military vets, realistically, their tactics are going to be more solid than mine because they've studied them.
Sure.
And so having someone there to help me with the tactics portion would be super helpful.
Play on your strengths.
Yep.
Puzzle/horror DMing is another way to do the story combat flip. In this case, though, one DM works on like the suspense and the narrative development, sort of similar to the story part,
Right.
but I would say more thematic.
Yeah.
So getting that audio, getting maybe the props down, and then the other DM works on things like puzzles or mysteries. This would be perfect for a Call of Cthulhu game.
Yes.
This would be perfect for a murder mystery game.
This would be perfect for a murder mystery Call of Cthulhu game.
Yeah, well, yeah. This also lets the DMs pace the story well and provide lots of fun thematic elements.
Yes. One of the things I enjoy about co-DMing is running sandbox games.
Mm-hmm. And this is our final type of co-DMing game.
Because you have exploration and open worlds, it is great to co-DM because you can have one DM maintaining the main objectives and regions and the other handling side quests or, RP elements or changing things as comments and ideas come up.
Sure. So player choices, consequence actions, you could have one DM handle that stuff, run a couple sessions until it gets back to a main story point, or if it becomes the main story point, then you swap seats again.
Yep.
And that can happen. That's a fun way to do it. If you've got a person who's an idea person, or maybe they're just a pirate, they come up with just some wacky stuff all the time,
Sure.
then have them DM all those wacky side quests or all those really interesting ideas, whereas maybe you're much more interested in running those main plot points. And if something that's wacky becomes a main plot point, then it becomes your domain.
Sure.
So there's a lot of different ways you can run things.
At the end of the day, you have to remember the key to success is clear communication, collaborative planning, and a shared understanding of the campaign's direction.
Yes, if you talk and plan it out properly, you and your co-DM and your players will have an amazing time.
And if you're actively communicating, even if the direction of the campaign changes, it's fine because the communication is there.
Absolutely. So there you have it. A couple of ways you can co-DM to run a campaign for more flavor, more fun, and probably an easier time.
Yeah.
Any questions or comments? Hit us up at Goblin's Corner on all the various socials. Did you enjoy this podcast? We're co-creating a couple more. Subscribe to it on your favorite player, YouTube and Twitch.
Click the 5 stars and give us a review on iTunes and Podchaser. And if you're on YouTube, hit the like and subscribe button. It helps get our show in front of more people, and it feeds the hungry algorithm.
Which is currently tagging out to yet another algorithm, which is about to take over.
It happens like that sometimes.
They have the luchador mask.
It's a Fibonacci of algorithms.
100%. That's all the time we have for this week. Once again, my name is Eric.
And I'm Matt.
We'll see you next time.
Good night, folks.
The Goblin's Corner has been written and produced by Eric Holden and Matt Staples.
Music by D20.
This is a Subterranean production.